my episodes, or at least one of them, going over my old musical exploits. I've done 3 of them so far. And there's one pretty crucial part of the story that I've had to leave out because I just didn't have the gear anymore. And that was my first real piece of recording gear. A hot pink Fostex X14 4-track cassette recorder. So let me tell you my story now that I've got one again, and it's a pretty long story. When I was 15 years old, I got my first 4-tracker, and there were 4 and 8 and I think even 16-track digital recorders on the consumer market by this point, but they were still pretty new and pretty pricey. I think the 4-trackers started at about $500 at the time. And things like computer interfaces were still mostly professional only. So they were kind of still a pipe dream to amateurs. So anyway, the reason I picked this out at the time was the price point. Again, it was $15. This was $80, and there were a few other colors of this available, but they were all $90. Again, same model and everything. And my conspiracy theory is that the hot pink was so vomit-inducing that nobody wanted to buy them, and Mars Music, where I bought this, had a massive backstock of the hot pink to unload, so they just started marking them down. But anyway, I recorded 2 so-called albums on one of these, and they were called Around the Sun, which I discussed on Volume 1, Ben's Music Career Volume 1, and Fallen Windows, which was on Volume 2. Then I did another 2 albums, one of which got cut down to an EP, and I may have cut at least part of a subsequent EP, using this as a backup to be synced to a Tascam Porta 2 4-track cassette recorder, which I upgraded to probably about 7 or 8 months after I got this guy. So let's fast forward to 2005 here. I was trying to raise money to cut an album in a real studio and everything, and I had to sell off a bunch of stuff. And one of the things I sold was my old Fostex, and I sold it on Fleabay to some guy in either Kentucky or Tennessee. Well, much more recently, after starting to look back on my old musical stuff here on Archive, I just thought it would be cute to start a running Fleabay search for another hot pink Fostex X14. Now, I should note here that my old one had one of the, if you will, thumbs break off. That's tapping on with my ring finger there. It broke off at one point, and it fell down into the guts of the machine. And it kept getting stuck, so I intentionally broke off the other one, but I did it in a bad place, and that fell down into the machine too. And I never did bother to try and fish it all out. But obviously I bought another hot pink X14 on Fleabay, but this came from Tennessee, and as you saw, the thumbs were broken off and they were still rattling around inside the machine. I've since gotten them out. The more I play with this, the more I'm convinced that I managed to buy back my old 4-tracker. So with that, let's take a cut here and we'll take a look at the basic operation of this thing. And there isn't much to that. As you've probably gathered by now, $80 didn't exactly get you a sophisticated piece of gear. But having said that, prior to owning this, I used to record my stuff digitally, strangely enough. But it was with the computer mic, and you remember the old ones with the 1/8-inch plug and the bass and the gooseneck and the tiny little diaphragm. And I would record it all to the little sound recorder program that came with Windows, which would only record for 1 minute at a time. So low tech as this was still light years ahead of what I had. And what I especially loved was that I didn't have to save the extra money to buy a microphone because it had one built in. Unfortunately, it's not a good microphone. It's very tinny, a lot of mid-upper range, and given that it's internal, you can hear all the gears and stuff in the machine clacking away in addition to your stuff.